Hey everyone, doing some TeaDB here, bringing on some ripe into an Inbetweenisode. So today I'm going to be talking about a little bit of a different ripe, and I'm also going to be talking about, at the first part of this episode, I don't know if you would want to call this a category or a subcategory of traditionally stored tea, but traditionally stored ripe pu'erh, which I think is an even more neglected category of tea than sort of like Hong Kong traditional stored raw pu'erh. And you know, a lot of serious pu'erh people, they will tend to write pu'erh if it's playing a fiddle at all. Usually gets to play second fiddle to raw pu'erh, and that's certainly the case for myself. Where I'm drinking ripe pu'erh regularly, but it's more of a casual brew. And not as concentrated or as focused as my raw pu'erh sessions. But it's a tea that isn't really talked about, and if you are able to try more aged or traditionally stored pu'erh, it tends to be of the raw variety. And I think traditionally stored raw pu'erh is great. I think people should try it. I think people should seek it out, get that reference point. But traditionally stored ripe is also its own sort of interesting category. And I was really no exception to that rule. I've always liked traditionally stored tea, but I really sought out traditionally stored raw pu'erh when I was in traveling to places like Taiwan and Hong Kong. And it's only really in the last few years that I've really become to appreciate more of the traditionally stored ripe tea. And it's a shame because I think I brought one onto an episode 3 years ago, a sort of traditionally stored loose tea that I bought while I was traveling in Hong Kong. But that's the only one I've really brought on, and it's not really available at all. So this tea is from Yee On Tea. It's the best taste ripe tea. So I was able to buy this online, and I think I'm going to be buying some more just because I like it, and it's something that I think perfectly personifies what I can drink on the regular. Yeah, so it's basically tea that's been sort of like warehouse stored in the vendor's special taste. And these sort of loose productions are pretty common to find, in my experience at least, in Hong Kong. They seem to, a lot of places have different house blends, and they're good because they are for drinking, not for collecting. And for the record, this is the same tea that I brought on to the Yee On episode where I talked about their tea. Because I like this tea a bunch, I had this a little bit too much, and so I'm giving this a good solid long brew because this is brew 8 or 9 for me in the day. So for this one, which is a little bit atypical, but wanted to still bring it onto the show. So you can see that color. It was brewing even darker earlier. These teas, the way I hear it described is sort of ginseng, and it's very sort of vegetal, beetroot-ish. So it's not a tea that everyone's going to love, but for me personally, and maybe it's just because I'm part Chinese, and my family immigrated to America about 100 years ago and opened up a traditional Chinese medicine shop. So maybe this stuff is just like sort of in my blood. But for me, this sort of tea is the ultimate comfort tea for me. It's not. I don't turn to this tea when I want like a super complex session. It's just super easy going down for me, and it's great to drink, great with dim sum, all that stuff. So cheers. Just really creamy, rich, decent body, soft. Those are very familiar flavors to I think everyone that drinks ripe. But there's a certain extra characteristic to there, and maybe that's sort of like that traditional Chinese medicine character, or maybe it's like a little bit of herbalness or ginseng to it. But I really like it, and I do think it brings something different and extra to it. Yeah. Obviously, the material for something like this is going to be nothing crazy at all. So it really speaks to the technique of the storage and in just making a fun tea to drink. And for me, this really squarely fits into a category of ripe drinking that I do drink regularly, daily with my wife. And it sort of also begs the question or brings up the topic of what are the teas that do end up passing the speed test? They're not necessarily the best teas, and in the case for me, in my life circumstances, I end up consuming a lot of ripe because of my wife and because she likes it. So something like this fits into my tea diet even better than something like a traditionally stored raw, because it's cheaper. My wife is not known for her attentive tea drinking, so I would hate to be brewing like $100 cakes every day, and she wouldn't know the difference between that and something much cheaper. This tea sells for about 10 cents a gram, so which is very, very reasonable for me. And it's just I think I like this more than other ripe teas, and it certainly breaks up sort of the monotony of just cycling through different ripes. So I'm going to buy a fair amount of this, and probably will be drinking through it for a while. The last time I had this was the tea I finished in around 2018. Looked up that episode beforehand, and it's a tea that I bought on my honeymoon 4 years ago in Hong Kong. Bought 600 grams, had it maybe once a week for that time, but it's something that I think I would like to drink more often. So I'm going to rate this tea a 6.5. It's obviously a very subjective rating, so rating these teas for myself is sort of my own criteria. So that's definitely above average and punching above its weight for me. And yeah, the last thing that I wanted to talk about briefly is, will this tea kill you? And it's always great when one of the most commonly asked questions about a certain tea is if it's going to result in death or anything like that. Personally, I don't think so. Hong Kong is... I'm not going to be able to back this up with medical journals and all that stuff. That is not the realm of research that I live in, so I wouldn't be able to understand that. I'll let other people do that. But it's a tea that's consumed most regularly in Hong Kong, which has the... highest life expectancy in the world, and I've seen Marshall talk about that, and I've also seen Marshall shout out these teas before, so I think some credit should go to him as far as like highlighting these sorts of teas that are often neglected in the West, and presenting it as something that should be worth seeking out. So really happy that I can bring a shout out a vendor where you can actually buy this stuff. So check out Yee On Tea, check this out. Set your expectations properly. Don't expect something that's going to be totally blow your mind into the next dimension with complexity or something like that. But I think for a daily drinker and for myself, this is just about perfect. So thank you all for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you've had sort of a traditionally stored ripe tea before, or if you've ordered from Yee On. I've done a couple of episodes now where I've mentioned them, so please do check them out if this sounds interesting. And I will see y'all next time.